Jeffrey, I'm going to step off it after that beginning, okay?
Understandably so. Are we recording? Oh, let's see.
We are ready to go.
All righty. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Manhattan Community Board 4's Executive Committee meeting for June. My name is Jeffrey LaFrancois. I'm the chair of the board, and it's a pleasure to be on the squares with you all this evening. Which, as we voted on last time, the executive order was extended through July 15th. So we remain in compliance with the open meetings law accordingly, regardless of the hybrid meeting policy position that we took last month, which will still go into effect in September. For folks participating on the Zoom, we will do as we always do in our meetings. We'll take items in the order in the agenda in which they're placed. The committee will discuss them. If there's any questions from the public, they can use the raised hand function, and folks will be brought over and then put back into attendees accordingly. And I think that's it for technical business. We do have quite a few items on the agenda tonight, and I do want to flag for folks that I want us to be cognizant of time and be efficient this evening. And so I will be calling us out to the best of my ability on that. I am just sharing that in advance at the top of the meeting. So we'll start with item 1, which is a bit of a presentation and a discussion about the Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition, here to discuss the reestablishment of the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement. And I believe we have a couple of folks from HKNC who are not on the board to talk to us about this evening.
So we have Brian Webb and Elka Fears.
Hi, Brian.
Hi. Hi, thank you. I believe Elka was
Elka,
going
yeah.
to
I see her name.
start us off.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Elka Fears, member of HKNC. I wanted to give a little history of the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement. So I'm going to read some of this so I don't get any history wrong. So Midtown Enforcement was established in the 1970s for the purpose of cleaning up the illegal massage parlors. The original footprint was from 30th Street to 60th Street in Manhattan, which included the Garment District. When illegal massage parlors started clustering below 30th Street in the mid-'80s, the footprint of Midtown Enforcement increased to cover that area as well. In 1983, Mayor Koch placed the Office of Midtown Enforcement at the disposal of police investigators in Queens, where community leaders had called for a crackdown of illegal spas. Now, Midtown Enforcement puts together a task force made up of inspectors from building, fire, police, health, and zoning departments. They took legal actions under the nuisance abatement law. The city enacted the nuisance abatement law in the 1970s to push the sex industry out of Times Square. Since then, the NYPD has greatly expanded its use, targeting businesses and homes, it said, were the sites of repeated criminal activity. Now, Midtown Enforcement also worked with community boards, neighborhood and block associations to identify and crack down on issues such as illegal demolition of buildings, illegal renovation of buildings and renovation in apartments, illegal signage on buildings, and they crack down on indoor prostitution rings in residential buildings. This is all residential. Illegal massage parlors in residential buildings, and illegal fortune tellers in residential buildings. And they closed down food cart depots in residential buildings that have propane containers stored. Mayor's Midtown enforcement was active from 1976 through 2002, when it evolved into special enforcement, dealing mostly with illegal Airbnb rental issues. So I hand it over to Brian now.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I noticed that Dale has his hand up. Should we just kind of continue and then?
Nope, Brian, we'll do the whole presentation.
Okay, very well. So the Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition has had conversations with Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine and Council Member Eric Botcher about resuscitating or bringing back the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement to deal with a lot of public safety and nuance issues. What we find is that the police are called to deal with pretty much everything across the board. And more often than not, a lot of these issues are not solely under their purview, and some of them are not under their purview at all. One example that in Midtown South, at least Midtown South Precinct, we get a lot of calls on are the Weed World vehicles. How does one contend with them? And I think everyone read that about a week ago. 12 of the vehicles were towed for outstanding parking tickets by the Sheriff's Department. The Weed World vehicles, there's been an ongoing investigation on them for something like 3 years now. It started pre-pandemic and it kind of fell off during that time period. But on any given day, you'll see an RV parked on 8th Avenue that is running a portable generator on the sidewalk next to it and selling product out of the truck. This isn't a conversation about the legality of cannabis or CBD. And to my knowledge, they're only selling CBD out of these trucks, but any issue with these trucks falls under the purview of Consumer Affairs, under vending, under the Department of Health, and as well as the FDNY, traffic, and the NYPD, should there be any illegal activity in them. So addressing a vehicle and getting a call from a homeowner or business owner or residential building saying, there's a Weed World truck parked out in front of my building, do something about it. Where do you begin? And that's why, to illustrate this, we were thinking about resuscitating or discussing resuscitating the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement, where we can speak to one agency and they can coordinate between the numerous city agencies that address the various issues regarding this. That's one example. Another example is today, a building owner said, I have a homeless encampment outside of my building, and just to the left of that, I have a food vendor parked on top of a subway grate sitting next to a fire hydrant. I need these entities to be removed for access in and out of our building. What do I do? Well, again, that's not a simple call, and it's not under the purview of the NYPD. That involves vending, it involves the FDNY, and it involves the Department of Homeless Services and sanitation. So how can we come up with an entity that can address these issues in an effective manner? So it's not us calling 5 different organizations to address one single problem. And that is what we're trying to revisit in conversations with the borough president, in conversation with the council member.
So I speak tonight, not as a member of the board, but as a member of HKNC Coalition. And very specifically, the reason the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement works so well, it was a small mayoral agency. It was actually based at 330 West 42nd Street, where our office, the community board's office was. And it had attached to it various other agencies and representatives. So there was a building inspector, there was a fire inspector, there were police. Depending upon what the issue was, they would come together and inspect or address a problem building or area. So one of the things we look at now is we have certain liquor stores on 8th Avenue in the 30s selling shots illegally. So if they could work and coordinate with the SLA in order to close down a business that was not following the SLA rules, for example. It was the response when there was a difficult time in Midtown, because the issue was that the massage parlors was not the service they were providing, but it was the criminality that came around them. There was a lot of activity and a lot of mob activity also at the same time. And what Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement would do is they would meet with the various stakeholders, block associations, community board all the time, and they would come up with a strategy to say, here's how we engage or treat or manage this issue. Let's work it out together. And then instead of having 15 agencies involved, they were the single agency, and they brought the other agencies together under one roof and one umbrella. So we've talked about this idea with both the borough president and the council member, and we really would like to work in collaboration with the board to determine how a version of the Mayor's Office of Midtown Enforcement can be put together to deal with all these myriad issues we have of public safety throughout the district. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to go order of hands, and then I'm going to speak after Katie. Dale, and then Bert, please.
Just one fine point about the kind of array of enforcement. When you mention the trucks that are idling on the street, I think that would be DEP, not just DOT. And also, I'm not gonna, if the historical presentation that Elke gave was supposed to instill confidence in this agency, it did not instill confidence in me. It seemed like a very problematic set of terms for an agency. But I'm going to address this to the board at large, and then you'll have your conversation about the specific issue. I feel like the board as a whole has abandoned wholesale the project of police accountability in the face of enforcement challenges and quality of life issues in the district. And I'm grossly disappointed in the board on that front. So I'll leave it at that.
Dale, the board hasn't taken a position on this topic this evening. So I think
it's not just this topic, it's
Okay.
it's the trend of the board at large. It's just constant calls for more policing and no calls for accountability. The idea of accountability from the NYPD, which is as problematic today as it was 2 years ago, has gone out the window with this board.
Thank you. Bert?
Yeah, mute, Bert.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Comes with the territory. Joe, you began to answer some of my question, which was the way I hear this agency, and you call it an agency, not a task force or something like that. I wanted to know, you gave me some sense of how it was structured, but I don't have a really good idea of who appoints. Who does it have staff? You say there's this one from that agency, this one from another agency, but who's the jefe? Who's
So-
the chief? Wait,
so the mayor-
Joe, let me finish. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
And the previous agency was at one point, I assume, was eliminated or stopped functioning, one or the other, officially eliminated or just stopped functioning. It seems the way it's described in terms of focus, it's almost like a default place. Nobody else is doing anything. Let's give it to these guys, whoever these guys are, whatever structure is created. It's default, but we can't get Department of Buildings. We can't get environmental protection. We can't get the police. We can't get sanitation to do anything. Okay, let's throw all of that together into one. Whoever that person is, that person now is responsible. It doesn't sound right to me, but it may be just theoretically, it doesn't sound right how government should work. but maybe practically, that's the way something will get done. I don't know. If I'm being focused or not, Joe, if you can respond in some way.
Sure. First and foremost, it was a mayoral agency. There was a director and a deputy director and some support staff. And the brilliance about this agency was it then had on loan various individuals from other agencies that came together under that umbrella for whatever the need was. It was not a police agency whatsoever. There was always a policeman assigned in case when they went to do an inspection at a location, someone said, don't come in or something like that. And what it did, Bert, it enabled, if there was a club that was operating over the C of O or something, for example, right, and acting very illegally, they would bring in a building inspector, a fire department inspector, a health inspector, who would then issue a whole series of violations around the poor operation in order to deal with enforcement of that club. And then eventually, let's say, for example, there were prostitution happening out of apartments. There'd be multiple inspections, and then under the nuisance abatement law, there would be a case brought for closure. So a famous hotel in our district, 300 West 46th Street, the Globe Hotel, turned into a place of prostitution. And in fact, the prostitution section was closed down and HPD appointed an administrator to administer the SRO hotel in order to bring it back to life, all through the mayor's office of Midtown Enforcement. So they would pull they had people posted directly, but then they would bring additional staff in depending upon the specific need of the agency. And it reported to the mayor's office, and it gave annual reports and quarterly reports, and also worked with the community board all the time. Is that a better sort of laying it out?
Yeah. So it had full-time staff, and then it had whatever particular issue it had good relationships with the existing bureaucracies, and they loaned them people.
They're actually on loan. There will always be a person on loan they could call, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Katie?
Thanks. I certainly appreciate the frustration about not having a clear place to address multiple problems. But I think that this is that this proposal is could be very problematic. I mean, it sounds like the initial activity that was that the mayor's office of Midtown Enforcement was designed to address was specific illegal activity, right? Illegal renovations, illegal demolitions, the prostitution, and that the legal action, as you said, was pursuant to the nuisance abatement law. And it sounds like what's really wanted right now, understandably, is some sort of coordinating place, right? That can say, we're going to go to these 3 city agencies because they're all involved in whatever the issue is. But the mayor's office of Midtown Enforcement, clearly by its name and by how it was set up, was to enforce laws that were being broken by illegal activity. And I really understand the concern that was raised previously by Dale, that this looks like, hey, since other people aren't sort of easily being focused on what we want them to focus on, we want to have we want to have something else created that's going to come help enforce these things. And so many of the issues that have been mentioned are the kinds of issues, frankly, that aren't necessarily illegal. They're certainly a nuisance. And we definitely have to have better ways of addressing them. But this idea of bringing in a Midtown enforcement agency does absolutely make it look like we are trying to police and clean our streets more. And I'm very concerned about how it comes across to those who have less, and specifically our residents and community members who are people of color. So I think we need to be really alert to how this is structured and how it could really go wrong. Thanks.
I'd like to share some information from City Hall on this topic that stemmed from the previous administration, and also this one. I think we understand more than most that titles and language actually mean a lot in the way that we approach things. And this morning, I was on a meeting to launch what is now being referred to as the new, I'm pulling up the name, Commercial Corridor Recovery Task Force. And it was the partner kickoff meeting. Now, you know, I think it's a love-hate relationship that CB4 is in the central business district and that most of our avenues are actually part of commercial corridors. But in this case, it could be useful. This recovery task force is being organized by the mayor's office. It has a slew of agencies on it, from buildings to consumer affairs, to the NYPD, to transportation. And this, of course, was born out of last summer. Mayor de Blasio tried to launch a similar effort. And this very specifically is coming out of the what I read as it's being overseen in the operations side of the mayor's office. So 2 deputy mayors are a part of this. Maria Torres Springer, who's the deputy mayor for economic development, and the other is operations, Mira Joshi. And obviously there are approaches across the 5 boroughs, but Manhattan in particular is segmented the most. No surprise there also. One of the key components, I think, for the area we're talking about is 59th Street to 30th Street is what they're calling it's the Manhattan Midtown location, and then there's the Midtown South location, which is everything below 30th Street to the Battery. So I wanted to share that because there is, I think, movement on a lot of this stuff. I will tell you that folks in the bid world, and I say this publicly, so I'm not speaking out of turn here. Many of them are dealing with the vending, the open air drug use, the homelessness, right, and a day in and day out issue, and are trying to get that stuff addressed. It's not just about the unsavory nature of activities that people do or don't like. It's literally just being able to walk from A to B for a lot of folks has become a challenge. And so the approach that I heard today from City Hall, I think, sounds a lot more like something we wouldn't think of as the Office of Midtown Enforcement. But based on the initial conversation, is all those agencies and is looking to sort of approach and find a way to address a lot of the issues that folks are raising tonight. And I think is what is stemming out of this conversation as well. Alan.
Thank you for that, Jeffrey. So I think how it's structured is one issue, but I think what's important here is for the public to have some place to call or to inquire in terms of what is going on in front of them. Right now, most folks will call 311, which doesn't do anything really much until they get several possible calls on a particular issue, and even then it doesn't happen. They call they call their local precinct, and the precinct is involved with something else. So I think having some sort of a central structure, an educated public knows that they can call and that there's a particular agency that will react to whatever is going on in a timely fashion is very important at this point in time. The issue of police accountability is something else that can be taken, but that's a separate issue also. But I think it's for the public to know that there is some agency that is going to take a matter in hand rather than something gets punted down from one post to another. So, but it needs work, and I think that's what we have.
Thanks, Alan. Leslie?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Full disclosure, I'm part of HKNC, but I'd removed myself from all meetings and discussions about this topic when I wasn't even there when they discussed it. But some may be surprised to hear that I actually agree with Dale. I think this board has not done enough to address police accountability. But with this, I was under the impression that we want to remove calling the police for every issue. And that's what this is doing effectively, because right now police are being called on. They police everything. It's always the police. We're calling the police for everything. And they're not equipped to deal with everything, nor do we want them to be involved in everything, especially some of these, I guess what I would call minor infractions or not even under their purview. So I guess I agree with Dale, but I would think this would be a solution to less police, because it's not calling in the police for every little thing. It's actually creating, or I should say recreating, because it was already created, an agency that will deal with problems that the police have absolutely no effing business in, really, to put it bluntly. That being said, and to others' points, I think people are getting caught up on the word enforcement. And Jeffrey said, you know, it's how you phrase things, right? And like Katie with the enforcement, and Katie mentioned something that, you know, this sounds like we want to clean up our streets. Well, yes, we do want to clean up our streets, and we want to do it in an effective, streamlined, efficient manner. And it's just so unfortunate because, as Alan said, I think right now when people call, they don't know who to call, or they get bumped from one agency to another agency to another agency, and it's people think government is ineffective for them. So I think this would remove police from being the automatic go-to, number one, and number two, it creates someone that is kind of like spokes in a wheel that can have a conversation with all agencies involved. I think people are getting caught up with enforcement, but anyway, those are my thoughts. And I don't think it necessarily has to be the same, you know, enforcement task force or whatever group that was before, but some version of it would definitely be helpful.
Thank you, Leslie. Christine, and then I'm going to go to Jesse Dale because you spoke already. Christine?
Yeah, so it seems, I mean, unless I'm wrong, that the sort of task force that has been announced for the commercial corridor is pretty much the same thing as the Midtown enforcement group that was being discussed, which existed before and which was very successful, I have to say. So that's the first thing. If it does exist, if they have created it, this is great. The second question is, how do we get to it? You know, who can bring issues to that group? And that's something that is difficult, is what are the channels to get to that group? What are the issues that can get? Is that Jesse? Is it, you know, is it you, Jeffrey? What it is? And so I think that if there is structure being built, being proposed, and we know how it works, we should let it. And I think the coordination between multiple agencies is critical, is really critical. And, you know, whatever we call it, and however we make it happen, it must happen, because otherwise nothing works.
Yeah, I guess just knowing HKNC's membership, you have Barbara Blair from the Garment District Alliance. She is on this task force. You have Tom Harris, who I think mentioned every issue today that has been has been raised on our meeting this evening. So I think there are folks who will very much be an important and loud voice for the concerns that are being raised this evening on the commercial side of things. Jesse.
I'll just give a little, from my perspective, background on when I first started. Was basically just as the whole special enforcement and Midtown enforcement was kind of really at the end there. Special enforcement still does exist in some ways, but their presence is a lot less. And I'll just say, you know, I think when there was some dedicated staff and inspectors, they would show up to our meetings, and they would show up to our district service cabinet meetings, and they would be responsive to specific, you know, issues. I think it would answer what Alan is saying, is people want to feel like there's someone to call that it doesn't go into the black hole of 311. I think Christina is right that there was, they were very productive. And I will just say, I mean, my experience with them was never from a police perspective. I mean, I think there was a police involvement like any other agency, but they're just really, it wasn't from that viewpoint. I mean, and we were dealing with a lot of illegal hotel situations and and shops that were selling illegal products in the store and all of that kind of stuff.
Clubs, and a lot of clubs at the time.
Clubs and stuff like that as well. So I'll just say that. And I just think this new initiative, I will just say that the difference, it sounds like a little bit, is that it's business focused, which is great. But I think what this Midtown enforcement and enforcement agencies really were able to do work on the residential things that were more complicated. And so I'll just highlight that. So if we wanted to advocate for this new organization, this new task force to really have some dedicated staff, there's something like that, I think that's important.
So I want to get this conversation wrapped up, and Mike Noble also has his hand up in the public. So Jesse, if we could bring Mike over.
Jeffrey, I
Yes,
just want to raise one more point, which is that I believe this community board is on record as saying that we think police precincts should be aligned with the community districts per the New York City Charter. And this is a further balkanization of police enforcement in our district. Because yes, it is, Joe, if you don't mind me.
Dale, you can address me, please. Thank you.
Yeah. We already have 2 or 3 overlapping police precincts. We have separate enforcement in the NYCHA projects, and we have separate enforcement for traffic. So to me, this is a further balkanization of enforcement. It opens the door for less accountability than we already have. And it's against our previously stated position of having police precincts aligned with the district.
Thank you, Dale. Joe, briefly, and then I'd like to go to Mike.
Sure. Just want to note again for the entire group, it's not a police agency. It's a coordinating agency. Midtown Enforcement became the mayor's office of special enforcement, so it exists, Bert, but the difference was it was focused solely on Midtown, and they went river to river, 30th to 60th. So that made a big difference for our district on the residential portion. The whole idea is to have a coordinating agency with staff that the board and the public could interface with directly to deal with problems that are multi-agency.
Mike Noble.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say that, all the things that Leslie said, I think are right on point. And we're essentially taking away this notion of going to the police every time there's an issue, right? So in terms of what Christine was worried about, how do you get to these people? We've got this new thing that's come upon us, the dashboard, the famous dashboard concept, where the public can get to these things online. They don't have to call anybody, sort of like 311, but this would be more specific. And you can do it, I think, a public-facing dashboard where businesses and residents, can get directly to the issue at hand for them. Get to deal with whatever it is. That's my, just suggestion. That's how you do it. Otherwise, how are you going to do it? It's this big amorphous entity, and how do you get to them? That's an issue, right? Anyway, that's my comment. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so I'm not sure what the goal of HKC and HKNC was this evening, to just sort of raise this. I think obviously it's a topic I think that merits a bit more discussion. And so it feels like, is this an HHHNS discussion a bit more, or does it come back to exec? I don't know. I don't see a resolution this evening coming out.
Yeah, I would say it would come back to exec as the thing. We wanted to talk about it and then talk about
that's
how
fine.
it's structured.
I'm good with that. So I think this also gives us, sorry, Joe, but to give us the next month or so to see if this new, commercial corridor task force, a recovery task force, can get itself in line, because my experience, the one that did come into existence in 2021, definitely was effective for certain things. So I think starting point was this discussion tonight, and sort of to be continued. And obviously I'll be able to share things as I learn them in the next couple of, over the next month or so as well.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. Thanks.
Jeffrey, I just want to say, I think we wanted to just come here and get some feedback from the board. We weren't
Perfect.
coming and looking for a resolution.
Thank you
And
for
so
that, Brian.
thank you. We appreciate all the comments and everything.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time.
Brian, Elka, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, everybody. Item 2, a new type of business on our docket, the business of adult consumption of cannabis and the sale of cannabis, and obviously something we need to be, I'm trying to avoid puns as I bring up this letter, sort of leaning into, and I think it's very useful for us to be proactive in this approach. And so, Jesse, I believe
Yep.
Jesse
got 'em.
Greenwald is in the audience, but this letter came out of BLP this month. Frank, Burt, I'm going to pass it over to you, you guys to sort of give us an overview, and I invited Jesse Greenwald as well to be here tonight.
Sure. As people may know, the community board is in the process of forming a working group to sort of keep an interim eye on how the legalization of cannabis is implemented, to sort of keep track of the evolving legislation, deal with issues they come up, and if necessary, elevate things to the full board. Before that working group could get going, however, we started hearing a lot of complaints, some of which just came up in the prior presentation about currently illegal sales of cannabis. Essentially, people sort of jumping the gun and starting to sell it, even though it is not actually legal to sell in New York yet. So in consultation with Jeffrey and Jesse Bodine, we decided to take the issue up with the BLP committee, not necessarily because that's where cannabis issues is going to land, but because it seemed like the closest committee to deal with it. We discussed the letter you have before you at our last meeting, and voted unanimously to approve it. However, the committee also felt that because it's not clearly within the BLP purview, it would be desirable for it to come before the executive committee as well. Jesse Greenwald has been heading up the sort of monitoring efforts in this area, and he also drafted the letter. So I think I'll turn things over to him now.
Jesse, anything to add?
I'll just keep it brief, which is just to say, just to add one more point, which is the reason we are here now and not is we are looking to try to send this letter as soon as possible and to not actually wait until it goes in front of the full board in a month. These businesses are multiplying at an expandingly at a rapid pace, and so and no one is really doing anything about it. To kind of piggyback off the last conversation, the last thing we would want is the further criminalization and police involvement in this area. But someone needs to do something. Like enforcement is still required here, and that this letter seeks to address that. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I'm not going to walk through the letter because I saw just how many items you have on your agenda.
Thank you, Jesse. Carrie, and then Jessica.
Thank you. I'm also on BLP, so I was there for the conversation around this letter. And I just want to point out a couple of quick things as you consider this. You would not know it walking through Chelsea, and I'm sure every neighborhood in the city right now, that weed is not legal yet. It's like on full display. And I think that from a couple of the store owners that I've spoken to, they also think, or, I'll take them at their word, that while they've filed for a license, they're allowed to do this. And I don't think that, I think part of the issue is enforcement, but a bigger part of the issue is sort of education and awareness and, creating an educated public. And that is one of the things that this letter wants to address as well. I think it's referred to as advertising, but it's really, I think, education, that the community doesn't know what status, like where we are in the status of legalization. And the vendors don't know that they're really not supposed to be selling drugs. And if they are selling drugs, they will be disqualified from getting a license when it is in fact legal. So they're disqualifying themselves which I don't think they know. So I just wanted to point that out. And thank you, Jesse, for writing this letter.
No problem. And just a small quick thing, obviously, just to make sure everyone knows, the personal consumption of cannabis is currently legal, but there have not been any dispensary licenses issued, and all of these businesses are operating as if they have a dispensary license or are lying to their customers and saying that they have such a license, and that is not the case, and it's really undercutting what is supposed to be a vibrant, well-regulated cannabis industry, and they're going to be hurting that. So,
all right, so no more hands after Paul, because this did go through a committee. And this is for exec discussion and ratification, really. And I just want to keep things going. Jessica.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I think it's a great letter. Great work, Jesse. I think that the section around public health risk, particularly a lot of these stores are opening up in close proximity to schools and are actually targeting minors. And we know that a lot of the dispensaries aren't checking or caring to check. I just think more can be said about the public health risk, specifically targeting young people. That will just amplify, make the letter stronger. In the case you're making stronger.
I'll make those corrections. Thank you so much for the feedback.
Thanks, Jessica. Marty?
Thank you. I appreciate this letter. I particularly appreciate a line in the middle, expert in this.
I'm sorry, is Martin frozen for anyone else?
Other folks, okay, yeah. He's frozen for me. Marty,
to deal with each of these points. So and I know that a lot of the.
Jesse, can you mute him?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Mr. Devlin?
It froze.
Thank you all. This isn't specifically about the letter. I think it's great and I support it. More so to go back to where these kinds of licensing of dispensaries will fall within the board. I think it makes sense to me that it goes to BLP, but I think that we probably need to make a decision about that sooner rather than later, because this is not going to be the first time something like this comes up. So that's my only comment. Thanks.
Dale, are you making a motion?
No, I was just going to say.
Can I try again?
Hold on one second, Marty. We'll let Dale go, then you can jump in.
Just real quick, Jesse, are we aware of the timeline for the sanctioned dispensaries appearing in Manhattan and in our district?
Yeah, so I've been trying to get someone from Office of Cannabis Management to get me a clear answer on that this past week. No one has been responding to my emails. I'm going to keep trying because it obviously is important to this letter. When I was originally drafting it, the timeline was somewhere in the 6-month mark, but I think they may be moving slightly quicker than that. They actually have already gone through the first round of conditional dispensary license. They've drafted regulations around conditional dispensary licenses, which I still need to get a deeper understanding what conditional means, but also that doesn't necessarily give us the timeline at all on when they draft applications and when those applications are distributed. So it doesn't, I understand the question. It's an important question. I don't have an answer, but I do think the time horizon is certainly at least months. It's not weeks or days, it is months. And,
okay. And in your letter, I appreciate that you have mentioned that one of the goals of the New York State's cannabis laws is to benefit those who might have been previously incarcerated due to marijuana convictions. And I just think that you might want to punch that as a goal of the state and say, you are effectively saying it, but I think it's important to note that these dispensaries, which are operating without the sanction or the permit or the license, are undercutting that effort at a restorative justice effort.
Yeah, I can make it a little clear. That's my fourth point. They're cutting the line essentially, and I completely agree with that. And I can try to tighten the language around that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale. Marty, and then Jesse will have the last.
I was walking around the neighborhood the other day, and I saw one street vendor with a tent and another truck. So it's not just storefronts, it is all over the place, as the previous discussion had. What I was trying to say before is that so much of this stuff is in flux, and the points in the letter make it seem more definite than it is, because much is changing. And I wonder if you could acknowledge that in the letter as all of the regulations and the minutia of whatever is happening gets put in place. I know that there's a huge discussion going on, and it is in flux.
So thank you.
Jesse, and
I
then
just do really-
Lazar, I'll look to you for a motion.
I'll just be really quick. I'd off of Dale's point and Jesse's point, I think, Jeffrey, we could definitely follow up. I know that BP's office is always asking me what agencies or organizations do we want to come to the borough board or borough service. And so I think that might be, I'm sure this is impacting everybody, so not just CB4.
Thank you. Bert?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? So we'll, this is the motion to adopt as amended. This will be sent out immediately with the signature of exec on it. And so the full board will ratify this at the end of July. Any questions on the motion? Excellent. Further executive committee members, any objections? Abstentions? Present, not eligible? The letter passes. Jesse Greenwald, thank you very much for drafting and for your input and continued attention on the topic.
Thank you so much.
For clarity's sake, I just want to make sure it's unanimous, right?
It's unanimous, yes.
I saw unanimous vote. Okay, great.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
You too. Okay. Transportation. These are 3 and 4. I'll pass them over to Christine and Dale. These are letters that are timely, which is why they're taking them up tonight.
Right, 2 and 4. So letter 3 it is a letter to MTA to reiterate that they need to really concentrate on reducing noise when they obtain a contract for this substation. And we told that verbally, but it didn't seem that they took that completely internally, and they are issuing an RFP. So that's a very simple letter. And the second one is a letter to HYHK to support, and DOT to support the creation of 2 shared streets along the Hudson Boulevard. We have already voted for a number of those shared streets. This one is really, those 2 are really ready for implementation. So this is what we are voted on, and then that will allow HYHK to get DOT support and to start the work.
Excuse me, Bert.
Oh my God, what is this?
Yeah, thank you. I think they're both 2 very good letters. The item number 3 is something very substantive and effective, affecting the community, tremendous impact. But I do think the last paragraph of 3 is kind of, I don't know exactly what word to use, not gratuitous. It's important, but it's sort of like a tack on. And I also think it may be an exaggeration.
What does it say? I don't know that in front.
The last paragraph says, since most of the residents, which I assume is more than 50%, and I question that. It says most of the residents can't use, it says, the residents also noted that although they will be extremely inconvenienced by this project, most of them will not benefit because they can't use the West 23rd Street station because it's not accessible, which means that we're talking about more than 50% of Penn South people can't climb the stairs.
Well, that was the representation that the president of the block association did. So I'm reflecting that, but I would change that.
I'm just saying, it just jumped out at me. It jumped out at me.
Right.
I think I had proposed changing that to many instead of most at one point.
That was going to be my suggestion, Dale.
Okay.
Sorry to be a curmudgeon.
Thanks, Bert. Marty?
The letter seems to imply that the Penn South Board has agreed with this substation. I made the phone call just before this meeting to assure myself that they have not. Penn South board, the last time I touched in with that substation, was opposed to its location in its entirety, and was allegedly working to contact officials that that substation not be placed there. It was originally sited there, and then then the site was moved to somewhere else, and then it came back to this location. It is a location that is in the middle of a residential area, as you know. There is a dental office nearby, cerebral palsy housing is nearby. Lots of elderly use that block. There is flooding on that block, and they had not heard about the nature of the bedrock, which was a technical thing about the selection of that location. But in any case, I am opposed personally to the location of that site there, and I think it is misguided. And I'm sorry that the board is writing a letter that seems to approve the location of this substation at that location. It's a bad choice.
Okay, so I have a different perspective, because I was at a meeting with the representative, with Amber, the president, and the whole discussion was about how to mitigate the problem. So that is the only thing we are discussing here. They are issuing an RFP. So we can say we are against it. Here, what I'm saying is that as the RFP is going out, you better have the proper mitigation. And the intention is not to say it is in support or not. It's like, it's a fact, the RFP is going out.
The letter doesn't say that we support or don't support the location. It should say we don't support the location and we should not support the location. And unless a line like that is in the letter, I can't vote for it.
Is there an alternative location that's been identified?
I mean, we have not heard.
The MTA is saying this is the only possible location. Right. I disbelieve that.
Right.
So this was discussed at transportation. There was a site visit with members of the committee as well. So I want to go to Katie next, and then Christine can respond. Katie?
Thanks. I would just suggest to make this a stronger letter, putting in more specifics. It seems very general at the moment. For example, you say construction limited to business working hours. Everybody can argue about like what business working hours are. If you mean you want it to be done by 7 p.m., I would like put that in there. And then it says the third point is no interference with the Penn South parks and gardens. Of course, people are going to argue that any noise at any time of day is interference with the parks and gardens. I think you should just try and be a little more specific about specific things you want, because that'll be easier to accommodate and more likely to be accommodated if you're more specific. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, so those are good points. We were just here repeating things which had been said in a lot of details in the walkthrough. So that's probably.
JD, I've got you.
I think the interference language, if it's being misconstrued, possibly was about that the construction and the demolition, the street, ripping up the streets, sidewalks, and so on would not impinge on their garden, their planted areas. So it's not really interference in the sense of interference with the quality of life at the gardens. It's more so physically, so we can clarify that language as well.
Sure. Right.
Yeah, you're talking about the use of the parks. I think that's my sense.
JD?
Yes, thank you. Christine, minor clarification. Sorry about this. Are we talking about the shared street on block 4 in the letter?
No, we're talking about the shared street on block 1 and 2.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay,
so
I'd like to take these. Oh, go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, so I don't know what to do, because obviously there was a walkthrough with the head of Penn South, and the whole discussion there was an issue of mitigating the noise. And then we announced that we had a discussion, and it was put on the agenda, and nobody showed up from Penn South. So I don't know what to do here. I will do whatever the board wants me to do. I thought
I'm gonna go to Jesse, and then I have a comment as well. Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something else, so I'm going to hold my comment for the end of the whole both letters. But I mean, Christine, I think your point is valid to say that what we're talking about is that we know this is happening, and the RFP is going out, and we have to, similar to other letters, I think we've written more, somewhat even like BLP letters, to say we might not necessarily have an opinion about or support this application, but we know that these are important things that were raised at the walkthrough. I certainly know that Penn South has had their own meetings with MTA, in which MTA has explained why they think this is still the best location. And they've gone through all of the other locations that they supposedly looked at. So I think, to my understanding, both Penn South board and aware of, yeah, and they were with us at that walkthrough. So I think the way
they
you
walked us through a survey of all possible other sites, and this was conclusively the least bad of all possible sites in terms of access, necessary access, and location for their operations.
But I think we can say, like Jesse is suggesting, we can say, look, whether it is the final determination or not, if you are issuing an RFP, these are some things that should go in the RFP. And without making a commitment nor a determination by the board that we are in favor of not of that location.
Marty, how does that sound?
Okay.
Okay, so I think we're going to take a vote on the letter, and it's likely there'll be an objection. So can I have a motion to adopt with the friendly amendments that have come in along the way for item 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Leslie. Any objections to the letter? One objection. Any abstentions? Present not eligible. So that means 14 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay, and item 4 on the shared streets. I'll take a motion to adopt.
Motion.
Thank you, JD. Christine has the second. Any objections? Abstentions? Present not eligible. Item 4 is unanimous. Thank you, Christine. Let's see, are we staying with transportation? Yeah, we have the other, another letter on transportation, West 35th and 8th Avenue. Or was this the laid over one?
No.
No, that's withdrawn.
That's withdrawn.
Withdrawn, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You have the curb use study.
Yes, exactly.
And for that, I'm as you know, we did a survey in February, and I'm going to turn to Blake, who has been really helpful and has been structuring the response and presenting the response.
Yeah,
Blake.
So, as you know, we did a community survey and we got quite a few responses. It was around 700 responses, including 400 who indicated that their zip code was one of the community district 4 zips. So the full graphs are in the Dropbox for the meeting, and this will be followed up with a letter that we'll vote on in the regular process, but wanted to bring it up since I think it has some relevance to sanitation planning and some other issue areas. So, out of the responses, we split up the responses by folks responding around residential streets versus commercial arterials. So you'll see that that's split in different sections of the graphs, and then it also is split between inner district and just the overall survey results. The top line was people prioritize public transit, pedestrian, and bike uses for the curb. And it was a little different for residential versus commercial. Residential MTA bus stops, greenery and bioswales, and bus lanes were most highly prioritized, and around the commercial streets, MTA bus stops again, and bus lanes, greenery, bioswales, and bike lanes. And those were similar across both Community District 4 as well as the total survey responses. And then the lower prioritized uses tended to be tour bus stops, NYPD parking, and space for black cars and taxis, across both types of space. And then the slides also include some of the commentary, around. Despite the top line numbers, there were some strong voices on both sides of prioritizing pedestrians over parking, as well as folks, particularly residents in the neighborhood, feeling the need for parking. Secondly, there were comments about enforcement, particularly around bikes on the sidewalk, and a fair number of comments about the outdoor dining as well, primarily against the use of the curb space for those due to sanitation issues. And then also comments about sanitation in general, looking to get trash off of the streets. So, happy to take any questions on these, and, the graphs are also in the Dropbox.
There's a lot. I was just gonna say there's a lot of data. It's definitely worth going through the presentation if folks haven't already. Leslie?
I mean, how awesome is this? This is unbelievable. Really, this is a great job, you guys, Trans and Blake too. This is great. I just have one question. Actually, I went through this and I can talk offline specifics, but there's one thing that says bus stop, inner city, I'm surprised that's people have voted that's low need. Am I reading that right? That we need bus stops is a low need thing, which
no, intercity.
Or no, am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it was split up across the different types of bus stops. So the MTAs were highly prioritized, whereas the inner city were low priority.
Those would be the buses that go to like Washington, Boston, like.
I'm sorry. I see. Okay, so not MTA bus site. This is inner city, meaning like, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Private coaches doing curbside.
Question.
Okay, I was wondering that was, okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Thanks, Leslie. Bert?
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, one is great in terms of what you discovered and when you went out and did. And it's also great in terms of the presentation. It's communicated very well, at least for me. I understand what you found. I like the way you divided it between total responses and CB4 responses, Manhattan Community District 4 responses. Question, now what do we do with this? Does this information animate some kind of policy that we may want to move towards, eventually have the board adopt? Or what do we want to do with this information? I don't have an idea yet. I was wondering if people in transportation or Blake, anybody have an idea?
Well, we thought we were going to do two things with that. One is to say that this is a framework that is going to, inform the decisions we're going to make in the future, right? But it's not a policy because there are so many parameters, but it's kind of giving us a sense of what the community wants. And then send something to DOT saying, you should have a strategy about organizing the curb, because you can't just leave it like that. There are too many things which are in competition, and you should really get a strategy around that. So that the idea was like in July, we would have a letter which talked about those two things.
Okay, thank you, Christine.
We love data. Jesse.
I just wanted to say that I think the amount of work that Dale and Christine and the Transportation Planning Committee are doing on a monthly basis is really impressive. The amount of 8 major agency multi-year projects that they are tackling on a monthly basis that are going to impact our neighborhoods for years, as Jeffrey knows, through his day job, and really kind of fine-tuning those and really highlighting what needs to be fixed and got get things done, and going back and getting things fixed that should have been fixed, 2 cycles ago. I mean, this is the stuff that community members really appreciate. And I've seen that through emails, and you can clearly see it through the work that they do at their actual committees, but you just see the difference. And I just wanted to highlight that they're just the amount of effort that they both do.
If only we were a less transportation heavy district.
Well, that, and I mean, what I've heard is the paychecks from the transportation committee to the members are the highest on the whole board.
Let's pay them double.
I got that bike lobby money now.
Give them a 50% increase.
Right. We'll take it.
But Blake, kudos to Blake for the presentation, for the
Blake did just a fantastic job. I mean,
he organized a lot of like pretty messy data points. Yeah.
All right,
The
enough
survey was a full mess, but the
congratulations. I'd like to
presentation is
move
great.
forward. Excellent. Looking forward to see what that gets used for and with. And thank you again to Christine Dale and of course Blake for putting that all together. And to the 700 responses, that's an impressive response rate from anybody that puts out a survey. So well done. Bert?
Just one thing, can we put something, put this up on the website?
Yes, we wanted to do that.
I think once we have a letter out of committee with it, they can sort of adopt it, right? And then we can have it live on the website and we can refer to it. Alan?
It could also live on the kiosks. It could also be in rotation on the.
Alan?
In terms of the responses, is there any way to pinpoint how many come out of Chelsea and how many come out of Hell's Kitchen? Is that worthwhile at some point, and maybe on the next survey to see how the communities are responding to these surveys? Because we've done several of these, and it'd be interesting to know maybe the outreach to one needs to get pushed a little bit more, get some more response from one, if in fact the numbers do show that that they're coming out of different.
But we'll talk with Blake about that, right? We should be able to do that.
I mean, we have zip code data, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we can do it.
Thank you.
Okay. So on to the chair's report. Port Authority Bus Terminal continues to be on hold. So we are holding, like all of you, on that topic, but look forward to re-engaging on conversations accordingly. Bert continues to sort of appropriately say hello and nudge to let them know we're ready when they are. This other minor project referred to as Penn Station. I had, thank you, Paul, a couple of updates there. We've been waiting in the wings for quite a while. This past Friday, I testified in person at 250 Broadway before the State Senate Finance Committee, the State Senate Committee on Cities, and the State Senate Committee, I think, on like Public Authorities and Oversight. I'm not sure the specific name, but Leroy Comrie is the chair of that. Liz Kruger is the chair of Senate Finance. This was a hearing about Penn Station. The first 2.5, 3 hours of the hearing was ESD, MTA, presenting, discussing, a lot of back and forth. And even in those first couple of hours, it became very clear there's a whole lot that we still don't know. Several hours later, I testified, along with Board 5, a number of advocates, a number of residents who we've been working closely with over the years. Literally, it's been 2 years now on this project that I've been a part of the CAC. And a lot of this is coming about for a number of reasons. The ESD, the Empire State Development Corp, their board of directors meetings to vote on the EIS is in a couple of days. This hearing was not necessarily meant to change anything, but to see if we could get more answers from the state out of this. A lot of things became very clear, and there were a couple of news articles that have come out after it since. I will say one thing very plainly, and I mentioned this to Jesse, as well as I was drafting our testimony, which came from all of the existing pieces of information we've put out on this topic. We are saying something that's quite ironic and hypocritical, because we oppose the use of private development to pay for a public infrastructure project. And at the same time, we are raising red flags over whether or not the state should be on the hook to pay for Penn Station and public infrastructure upgrades. So I'm finding myself at a difficult point here of wondering what we as a community, and I'm saying this as I didn't change our scope or our position at all, but to begin thinking through, if we don't want our tax dollars to pay for things like Penn Station, what do we want them to pay for? And much of the discussion now is coming out of how much Penn Station will cost us. And New York's development scheme for public infrastructure projects is often paid for by private development. And so here we are sort of in this universe of opposing, of a lot of people not being happy that this is the way things are done, but they're being done this way. And we have to sort of thread a very particular needle. So I'm just sharing that. Our testimony was very well received. I flagged the fact that we have long sought absolute numbers of housing and absolute numbers of permanent affordable housing. That if and when this project does go forward in a form like this or something else, we have to make sure that any air rights that are transferred to pay for the project are at a market rate, not a rate set today, but a rate that meets the market when they're transferred. And that we have specific experience with that along the Highline Development Corridor and Hudson River Park Trust air rights transfers. And that in follow-up questions, I asked what the goal of the hearing was and what their plan was. And it was to really acknowledge that the stars are aligned to make something happen between the feds, the railroads, and the state. It was very clear that the concern is politics of losing Congress, and potentially the Senate, and that we need to get more than just a handshake on this very, very soon. So it was almost an 8-hour hearing. And then today, Liz Kruger came out and said, Madison Square Garden needs to move. She believes a deal should be made by the end of the year to relocate it. And that would allow a real project to happen. On Wednesday, the CACWAG, this Community Advisory Council Working Group, will be meeting. I cannot be there, but Paul, I know you've accepted the invitation, and Christine, I'm not sure if you can attend or not, but we expect a few more updates from them. Christine.
Yeah, when you said that we are advocating two things, my recollection is we are mostly advocating that we do not want upzoning to fund the station, and that the money can be found at the state or at the Fed to do this project.
We've never explicitly
I thought that's what we were trying to say.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with what you just said, but I don't believe we've ever explicitly said the development should be paid for by the city, state, and federal governments, full stop.
Okay.
So I think that if we want to go a step further, I think we should consider that. I don't think it's for tonight, but it's where the waters are starting to get muddied, I think, as there's more and more discussion as we march towards what looks like something is going to happen. Bert?
Yeah, I don't think, and maybe I'm splitting hairs, I don't think we're necessarily against, as a board, private development helping pay for public goods, because we've done that at the Highline. We've had along the Highline different kinds of zoning that would not have been normally acceptable, but we did exceptions. And some of that was, I don't want to use the word blackmail, but the Highline was given money by private developers. And I think we've used this before in other parts of the district. I think our objection in Penn Station right now is this particular kind of private development we're against. Not necessarily that we're against private development helping pay for public goods.
No, I don't think so either, Bert. I agree with you. I say this because the chorus of testimony that the state should not be on the hook for the station was a sort of a new red flag raised by some of these groups opposing the project. And so I'm shedding some light on that for us to be aware accordingly. I don't think it affects our positioning, but it did sort of highlight new forms of attack on the project. I will say that we were, for the first time, not at all in alignment with Board 5. Board 5 called for this plan to not proceed at all, as is, full stop. So that is a divergence for us. Anything else on Penn Station? Okay. Sanitation Planning Working Group. Christine, I believe you have your last meeting for the group tomorrow. Anything high level to share before that gets started to be shared with committees?
Really not. It's a lot of details. It's difficult.
That's
fine. But the thing to remember is that if we have our final committee tomorrow and our recommendation, the plan was to put it on the agenda of a few committees this month. So I presume it would go on land use, right, Jesse? And on the ACE committee, right?
How do Alan, Kit, JD, Paul, Jessica, Kerry, how do you guys feel about that?
When you say this month, do you mean June? Because our meeting is tomorrow.
No, not tomorrow, Carrie.
Okay, thanks.
No, July.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that would be good to add it to each of those committee, and we'll make a quick presentation of what it is.
Sounds good.
And if you have anything for BLP, we'll accept it.
Bert. Okay.
Bottle recycling.
Correct. Thank you, Christine. Just a couple of other bits on small meetings. There's been discussions with the council member and the borough president, city planning about the MTA site. There's been site visits, a number of meetings on those. That was my participation in small meetings this month. Anything else to share, Jesse, or flag on other small meetings? I don't think so when I did my calendar review.
No, I apologize, Jeffrey.
That's okay. I am a responsible adult and I can look at my calendar too. So then finally, we had 5 new members join the board. We are now in receipt of all their committee assignment or their committee preferences. I'm going to be sending notes to board chairs this week about potential placements. And so stay tuned to hear from me on that. Note that BLP lost 2 members, but I'm not planning to add any. And Clue also will remain as is. All the other committees, I expect to have some new folks going into. So stay tuned and more to come on that. And so then I pass, Jesse, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and we will send out resumes of the folks too, so you guys have a little more background. You don't just have a name and an email.
Yep. Jesse, over to you for district manager's report.
Okay. I had it here and now I don't have it. Give me a second.
You're frozen.
So Jeffrey started off all at this. I'm frozen. Am I back?
You're back.
Yes. Oh, great. Fantastic. All right. That's right. So the state extended the executive order into mid-July. Normally what happens is the city takes that and then extends their executive order, which is on a different cycle, which will most likely go to the end of July, fully to the end of July. So we are officially covered in that way. So that's going to be helpful. I don't have any news whether it goes past the middle of July for the state. I'm assuming it might, just because it's just safer that way, and we can all pick this back up in the fall. July committee schedule. There's no changes in terms of committee meetings when they're all meeting. You guys are all meeting at the normal times. Please take a look. The tentative July committee agendas for all of your committees is in the Dropbox. Please take a look at that. If you have questions about what's on your agenda or another committee agenda, this is a perfect time. If not right now, some other time, shortly, but this week, to sort of question and find out what's going on. I would like to add two things tentatively to the July agenda. Joe unfortunately had to hop off because he wasn't feeling well, but I did mention this to him. We typically do some level of member training when a new batch of members comes on. We haven't done it really officially in quite a while. So I'd like us to get back into that, even if it's on Zoom and it's not going to be in person. So we normally have an exec committee meeting on July, that Monday, the last week of the month, and that's going to be July 25th. Our full board is 2 days after that, so I don't think we're going to really require it. So I would like to tentatively put do some type of member training. And I thought land use was always our solid one we would always do, and Joe and some other co-chairs usually do that, and we have a PowerPoint and everything. I also thought, Leslie, I emailed you along with Joe. I thought maybe a short something on the budget process, how we get involved in the budget would be helpful for new members, since that is such a significant component. That's really what the new members will be really tackling coming in September. That'll be the first thing that they'll be doing. If there's anything else, I think we could possibly do something, or just want to do general Q&A if people have questions about just how the culture and the way CB4 works and compared to other boards. I thought that might be helpful. So that's one thing I thought we would add. And then we typically have a social event the day after our full board in July, which I thought, with the idea that it'd be outside, of course, and it's obviously completely voluntary, that we could try to pull something off like that. And so, it's always historically what we've always done. We haven't done it in quite a while. So I would like to think about organizing that. Again, that's just purely on my shoulders, but I wanted to sort of check in with exec and see how everybody feels about that. And if we are comfortable and that would work with the majority of folks. And I have one more new business item at the end that I want to raise about merit increases for some of the staff.
Paul?
Jesse, in the Hell's Kitchen land use tentative agenda, you have Tishman Speyer coming back in on block 4. Or is that a copy over from the last time?
No, it's just tentative because I don't know when they're going to be. So, they had mentioned September. They'd be coming back to us in September. Between you and me, I'm happy if they would come back in September. I just don't know when DCP will certify them. So I rather have it on the agenda and take it off than rush around and make So yeah, we also have tentatively. And tentatively, we have FDNY and the city coming to Clue for the placement of the EMS station on 29th Street. So, which has been a big, one of our biggest, requests for quite a while. So
if we don't have Tishman Speyer, I want to, Christine, think about whether we do the new trash issues in July or maybe move it to August, because if it's, we may be able to spread that out.
In August.
We don't
That's
meet in
the
August.
issue.
Oh, we don't have any meetings on it. All right. Okay, thanks. And as a final note, I'm in favor of any merit pay for staff.
Thank you, Paul. I think I saw general head nods on the 28th also, is if folks are around. Relatively social, excellent, outside.
Yep.
Okay, Jesse, sorry, back to you.
Yeah, so I think the only other thing I said, I mentioned at the new business section, I want to raise some merit increases for staff. And then just very quickly, we're continuing to work on our new office space location. Things are moving along, which is good. Everybody's very motivated from the city to get this happen, because if they don't, then we go into holdover. The holdover clauses in the license agreement are pretty painful for the city. So that's always a good moment to get us to get this going. So that's my only other major update.
Any questions for Jesse? Okay, new business. We'll start. Oh, Bert, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of the ULURP for the EMS site on 29th Street. I mean, I haven't seen the proposal at all, but are we talking about they actually will be moving in a reasonable amount of time? Because I thought that that site was contingent upon, you know, the digging of the tunnel, gateway tunnel, whatever they call it now.
That is to be determined. Yes, no, I don't. The answer is I don't know. That is one of the red flags I raised when they came to us and said, oh, we're going to cite this. And I was like, that's wonderful. Does that mean it's going to get built, or does that mean it gets cited and then we sit there for 10 years and wait? Because that's the whole point, is that if it gets, you know, but either way, I will say this is a good first step, because what will happen is if it's cited, then it has to be included into the environmental impact statement of the Hudson Tunnel project, which therefore it has to recognize that they are impacting a city service, a public safety service, and they have to mitigate it, which is then when we go back to Port Authority Amtrak and say, now you've got to fix, if you're not going to allow them to build it now, you've got to come up with a decade-long, you know, brick and mortar solution.
Okay, thanks, Jesse.
No problem.
All right, Jesse, on the new business.
So this is just very quick. It's been a while since I've had to did the raise process. In the past, I've never had to ask for a vote of any sort, but now the rules have changed because I think some other boards have did some things that they shouldn't have done, and now I have to get a vote for any time I want to increase the salary of my staff. So I haven't really figured it all out in detail yet, because this is for FY23. It's not now, it's literally next week. And so that budget hasn't come in yet, but I would like to go ahead and move along with that this month, be able to start that process with them, because it does take a while. So I'd like to ask your guys' support to provide the staff. I'm comfortable with somewhere between a 2% and 4% increase in their salary going forward.
I would recommend that we defer to the district manager on this decision. And I think it's unfortunate that we as a board have to take this vote. So I look for unanimous acceptance for what Jesse is seeking today. Bert, and then JD.
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification. I know they're working without a contract, whatever contract they had, it expired. This merit increase is in addition to whatever contractual increase they will receive retroactively when a new contract is agreed to?
Yes.
So it's on top of any contractual increase?
Yes.
Okay, that's very good. I support it.
Thank you, Bert. JD?
I was going to move to support it. Anybody that puts up with this board deserves many merit increases. So I support this.
Thank you, JD. And I'll take that as a motion. And is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Any objections? Abstention? Present, not eligible? Thank you, everybody, for that unanimous support.
And just to be clear, that's not including me. That is just purely
We'll
staff.
vote on that later, Jesse.
No, I think that's a reduction. That's a reduction. We need to talk about, I'm just kidding.
We have to go into executive session.
Correct. Okay, anything else? Leslie, do you want to?
Should we?
If you want to. For thought, I
Okay.
think it's a good idea.
One new business item. I remember when the committee for elections here on the board, when I think it was Kit, it was a question from Kit when I was running for second vice chair, we were all running. Kit asked me an interesting question. He said, what can you do about bettering our social media presence? And I remember that question. And he said, what do you think? Like, what are your ideas? Do you think we need to? So I took it in earnest and I went back and I do look at social media, especially the CB4 social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is. And I do think that we could, if we work out a way, I know it'd be hard, but how we can maybe push our presence a little more on social media, because right now on Twitter, it's like, this meeting is tonight, or, you know, some sort of meeting. It's really more of a notice stream or notification stream. And I think we do a lot of good things. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if I'm alone in this, but people like, what is the community board? What do you guys even do? Like, what do you talk about? And it kind of spurred me. I was with Marty and we were talking, we went to, there was a press conference with Eric, Councilmember Eric Botcher, with Parks. Speaker Adams came, and it was about the announcement of a new rehaul of Penn South Playground, which, by the way, Jesse, is now finally off our budget request list, if that's going. And it was a really good moment, and it was something that could have been maybe pushed on social, like a picture saying, hey, you know, the community board has fought long and hard for this. It's finally happening. Like good things like that. I'm not saying we get into any ideology or, you know, or what we think about, or like Blake and Christine's and Dale's survey would be a really nice social media post, right? I just think maybe if there's some way we can do it, that we make a little bit of a bigger imprint there and start tagging people, you know, tag our council member or tag whatever you think. I might be going a step too far, or tag Parks. Hey, you know, Parks is doing planting trees today. What do you think? You know, so I don't know what you guys think of how we could do it. Jesse, I know you probably have a lot of thoughts on this because it might fall in your lap as far as approving posts. And I know that might get dicey, but I think there is a way we can navigate it where we put out stuff we've done. What do you guys think?
It's 8:04. We're ending the meeting at 8:15 because this is just an idea for preliminary discussion. So Dale, Leslie, thank you, Leslie, by the way. Sorry.
I think it's a good approach. I would say like, and especially towards like, you know, issue oriented. I'm almost seeing it like as a monthly recap or a quarterly recap or a year in review. Like, this is what we've been working on for the last month, and, you know, flagging some of the kind of, I mean, I recently did one just for my own personal, you know, Twitter feed that was like reflecting like our amplification of the voices in opposition to helicopter traffic over the district in relation to the law that passed in New York. And it got a fair amount of engagement. So yeah, related to stuff that people are interested in and stuff and if it can be neutral, in other words, not taking positions. If it's like, we did this and then this happened and we were this part of it.
Thanks, Dale. Jessica?
Thanks. I think it's a great idea insofar as, I mean, some of us, Leslie, I think you and I have also talked about this, that like so many people don't know, or my peer group is completely unaware of what's happening at the community board level and what role we can play. So, and all of them are on Twitter. So I think from that perspective, it would be very good. I do think it is very challenging as well. And so even posting things like Blake's amazing report, like probably can't do that until after the board has already seen it. And so also just who's going to be responsible for really like looking at the cadence of when things are posted. I do think that we can do a lot in tagging CB4 and doing things that make it not the official post, because with the official post just requires all of that review and consideration of the various parties that we might like, and also who monitors responses to such posts, and all of the things that come with creating an engaging and accurate social media feed. So the other piece I wanted to mention is, Jesse, I think you alluded to things that you can bring to like Borough Board or other, you know, bigger tables. And I would be interested to know how other community boards manage something like this, because there probably are considerations that are like very universal, that are worth learning from.
Thanks, Jessica. Christine?
We started to do that a little while ago, and one person was dedicated at doing this. But I think the better way would be that every chair is responsible for, pushing out what has been done. And yeah, it's very risky, but at the same time, I don't know how you can do it otherwise. So I think that's the discussion we need to have, is who is pushing it out. And only the chairs, I think, can push it out because there is so much happening, and they know what's going on. So, but that's my thoughts.
Kit?
Hi, everybody. Apologies, I'm off camera. It is bedtime for the 1-year-old and the 4-year-old around here. Leslie, I have no memory of asking you that question, but I do think this is a good idea, so I'll take full credit for it. And I do think that
Thanks.
this
Now I don't know how I
merits-
feel about my interview, but okay.
Well, clearly you nailed the interview because you got the job. I do think this merits further discussion. And to Christine's point, I think a big dimension of this is if we start doing it, how do we set it up in a sustainable way? I think the chair is one possible solution there. I think talking to Jesse and his team about, while they have many things going on, are there ways to make this sort of manageable for one person to own, and it fits in their job description, and it's more about saying things like such and such elected is going to be here, and we said this and the board's position was this, and I realize that's more complicated to actually do than for me to say, but I think just walking around the neighborhood and seeing on those screens on the terminals that we were advertising, that made me think that we were getting the word out a little bit better. This would be another way that we could really, I think, reach a different group of folks and hopefully engage them, which is something that I think we've all had a lot of different conversations about during our time on the board. So, there's a lot of different possibilities. And even if it's just publicizing, these are the things that we're doing, or these are the things that we did, I think there's a lot of value in that.
I also think I agree with you, Kit. And I also think, listen, when we go to board, right, and we're in committee and we're talking about issues, there's a lot of back and forth, right? There's a lot of opposing ideas. But the reality, though, over the end result, I should say, of what is being done could be simple pictures. Like, Christine, do you remember when you met with Linda Rosenthal at 57th Street because that the light was put in? That was a great picture. And it's like, hey, we put a new left-hand turn light, whatever, light, things like that. Not necessarily, I was envisioning pushing any type of ideas or this vote or that vote or anything before anything is passed officially in at full board, but more kind of, this is what we're doing. I was envisioning that it would be more the logistics that were tough, right? Who's going to do it? What is the procedure? How does it get approved? And, like, what's the picture look like? That type of thing, more than, I think content, we all know what we could put in, what we can't put, but I think it's more kind of how do we go about it in a consistent manner.
Jesse?
Yeah, I'll say this. I think if there are, this is completely not my wheelhouse. Just to give everybody understanding, I am not on Facebook personally. I am not on Instagram. I am on Twitter solely because of this job, and I have to check it every once in a while. So I'm not. Janine really is the person in our office that does that, and it like Leslie said, it really is just kind of a repackaging of the e-newsletters that we're sending out, right? Every once in a while, I'll say to her, "This is something we should get out now. Let's get it out on social media," right? And it doesn't have an e-newsletter component to it. So that being said, if we're not making any major decisions tonight, but we're having this conversation, I won't go much longer into it. But I will say, if there are things that are maybe easy to do, things that we could, that can be done in-house by our staff, by Janine and or myself, that would make our presence better known, that don't take up a lot of kind of time, and also don't kind of require us to start making prioritizations of we're doing it to this and we're not doing it to that. That's what my concern is as well. Then I think we should talk about those. And if someone knows those, Leslie, if you know them, or if someone else knows Twitter and how to maximize Twitter to better your organization, I'm happy to learn those those things and sort of implement some of them. I think going beyond that, if there's a desire to have more of a presence, more statements, more images, all of those things, I am going to have to really defer to the members. I think my concern is both the sustainability issue. I think also it is us making decisions about what gets seen and what doesn't get seen, and I think that's got to be coming from someone from the board making that decision. And so so that's, I'll just say that if there's certain parameters that we could work out, and there's images, maybe a couple images a week that we want to be able to highlight, that we send to the chair or the vice chair or something like that for review and sign off on, that's fine. I think we need to have an idea about if we're naming people, meaning board members, if they're all comfortable with that kind of thing. So, but I defer to you guys. We tried to do this, I think during Dolores's time as chair, I think is what Christine was referring to, and it didn't last very long. And so I'm happy to engage, but I'll definitely need. I would defer to the board on a lot of it.
So I think, thank you. First of all, thank you, Leslie, for raising it. I think it's actually a really opportune time to do so, because coming up on sort of summer break, to think through what parameters, if we want to create any, could look like, and continue having folks think about it. And I think we can raise this again at our next meeting.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. Also, I'm really pleased to say that it's 8:14 and the sun is still shining. I see that as good West Siders, I'm seeing light in many people's windows. And so
motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Christine.
Dinner.
JD had the second. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you rest of the committees this month and in person the end of the month of July. So happy 4th all. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Good night.